The reason I became a Passionist in the first place predates ever hearing about the Passionists. It was, as a young man, feeling within me a call to a vocation to priesthood religious life and trying to work out what the deep elements of that would consist of. And after a process of a couple of years of thinking about it, praying about it, talking to people, two key things came to me that I was being called to, or I was looking for. And the first of those was a significant prayer life, a life of contemplation, a life of thoughtfulness. And in St. Paul of the Cross, who founded the Passionists, I found that element was quite emphasized, was a very important, strong point of it. And the other thing for me was going to be involvement with people whose lives were suffering in some way. In those days, I didn't have theological language to try and express that, but it was just some sense, and that was where I was destined to be, what I was meant to be about. So I looked at different religious orders, and when I discovered the Passionists, lots of boxes were being ticked in terms of what the Passionists are and what I felt within me was the sort of life I wanted to lead, I was being called to lead. So inevitably then a period of training follows, and that's quite lengthy for religious life and priesthood. But I was learning from there the language of the Passionists, which is of a crucified God who loved us so much that he was willing to send his own son to be part of human experience, a son who was willing to take on mortality, and not just any sort of mortality, but death on a cross, the Roman cross, executed by the powerful people of the world, and give his life for us, and then rise from the dead. And so the heart of the Passionist vocation, I believe, is all to do with the love of God. It's the powerful love of God that doesn't act in a violent or aggressive way, but acts against those things and is the deepest reality in all of creation. So at the very center of me, there is something, I hope, of that. And that translates itself into how we live our lives. Passionists are very practical people. We're not theoretical people. We sort of get out there, and as Pope Francis has said, he likes a church that rolls up its sleeves and gets on with things. So that's, I think, what we try to do as Passionists. So for myself, after my training, that involved working in a parish for a number of years. And I was very fortunate that the parish where I was working was in Sutton St. Helens. And the significance of that place is because it's there that Blessed Dominic Barbary, Ignatius Spencer and Elizabeth Prout are buried. They were the foundational figures of Passionist life in England. We'd come from Italy, more than 100 years earlier than that. But to be the first Passionist in England, that's where they're buried, and they're recognized for their holiness and their self-sacrificing lives. So I was very lucky that I was able to work in that environment with the people who were from that place. At the same time as working in the parish, I began my work as a prison chaplain. And when I started work as a prison chaplain, I felt now, yes, indeed, all the boxes are being ticked. I was living out the sort of values that were so important to me as a Passionist. And it sounds strange perhaps to say that I enjoyed working in a prison, but I enjoyed working in a prison because of those values which informed my being there. And what I discovered going into a prison was obviously flawed human beings who had done some terrible things. I was mixing with murderers and arsonists and child abusers and the whole range of criminal offence that people can commit. And the first thing to always say, I think, is to acknowledge the pain that is caused by the actions of human beings towards other people. So I'm not ever trying to excuse or apologise for people who are in prison. They have done terrible things. But alongside that, and at the same time, you must remember always, they are God's children. They are human beings. They are people themselves whose backgrounds are often painfully suffering, and a whole catalogue of things which people would experience to bring them to the point of finding themselves in jail. So very often from experiences of poverty, from broken homes, no parents or bad parents, very poor opportunities at school, no encouragement to do well, no sense of progressing in life. And then often as teenagers, drugs, gangs and violence, and before you know it, a 15-year-old young man can be inside a jail and facing a career as a criminal in and out of prison. So into that situation I found myself as a Passionist, trying to bring something of hope and love and compassion perhaps, but finding at the same time that I was being challenged and informed and educated myself by the very situation I was in. And so I worked for many years as a prison chaplain alongside some great people and some inspiring stories, some heartbreaking stories in real people's lives that I experienced. And that for me was a great honour to be able to do that. Presently, I still carry on my Passionist work and life here now in my hometown of Birmingham. And Martin and myself live in Spark Hill, which is a very multicultural, ethnic background area where we live. And a great tradition of Passionist life has always been our positive relationship and attitude towards other Christians, Christians of other denominations, and also in more recent times, people of other faiths. So we don't come to Spark Hill looking to convert people or persuade them that they're wrong and we're right. We come to live amongst them as a presence for our faith and to be part of that community. And so we come with a very positive attitude. We live with homeless asylum seekers, and they come from some of the most terrible, war-torn, poverty-stricken, oppressed societies that the planet has got. And of course, we live in a time now when these things are political hot potatoes. You turn the television on, you hear speeches from presidents and prime ministers, and the discourse of politics is often very against and negative towards the sort of people we find ourselves relating to and dealing with. And so inevitably, a deep spiritual life mixed in with a theological tradition ends up often in a very political sort of expression. The way we live our lives challenges, I believe, some of the fundamental prejudices and antagonisms which are current and were still very much present when Christ himself was being crucified. The background to it would probably be that religious orders carry within them what we call a charism. It's a set of values, an attitude, a spirituality which expresses itself in very practical ways. It's fair to say that sometimes the religious orders have tended to think that that spirit is for within themselves only, and that of course is not true. These things are given by God and the Holy Spirit to the whole church. So the community of the Passion is a group of people that share the same values that we do, see the world in the same way that we do, have the same faith that we do. And the background to how we formed it was personal knowledge of many people who shared our attitude and outlook, but weren't in a position where they could meet each other, weren't in a position where they could share that faith or be strengthened in that faith. And so as a very simple back of an envelope sort of idea, we thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to invite those people to meet with ourselves, with each other, and just see where that takes us to. And out of that very simple idea has developed the community of the Passion. So the community of the Passion is a group of people, some of who are in religious vows, some of who are married, some of who are single, in various jobs and situations in life, but with a common thing of being attracted by the Passionist outlook, that commitment to a crucified God, a crucified people and a crucified world. And the sort of things that are important to the members of the community of the Passion are just those very things. So the meetings are held on a regular basis throughout the year. They're based on prayer and the Eucharist. They're based on two key questions where we share our reflections with each other. Where have we experienced the crucifixion in our lives since the last time we met, or on an ongoing basis? And because it's absolutely essential to remember that the love of God is at the heart of these things, the second question, where have we experienced the resurrection in our lives since the last meeting, or in general terms. And it's important we do both of those things, because otherwise we can end up being very depressed and negative attitude, and oh God, the world's a mess, isn't it? Which it often is, but the thing that holds it all together and motivates us is the guidance, the love of God, and at the end of the day, that being the deepest reality.